Hi, everybody. My name is Kris Rangarajan. I lead solutions marketing for Agentic Ops for future-proof workplaces. I'm joined here today with Raj, who's going to talk a lot about Agentic Ops. So, Raj, welcome. Can you introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Rikhy. I'm a product leader here for our AI platform and our Agentic Ops strategy here at Cisco as well.
Wonderful. You know what's funny, Raj, is that, every customer I ever talk to, I think AI is so nascent and there's such an evolution. Agentic Ops is agentic. What makes something agentic? Can you talk a little bit about
Yeah.
AI and what that evolution looks like?
Yeah, totally. I think what's interesting is AI had a total revolution about 2 to 3 years ago. But actually, in practice, what it really is the process of detecting and predicting patterns, right? Which is actually something that Cisco's pretty good at.
Yeah.
We've been doing that now, embedding software for networking around patterns of different, data feeds, et cetera, for quite some time. But that specific delta between AI and what we call agentic ops is really defined by the transition of, moving from we're aggregating information and we're presenting it and presenting predictions all the way to the future, which is we're reasoning based on that information using state-of-the-art models, the latest and greatest intelligence, as well as, by the way, not just stopping at reasoning, all the way through to execution as well.
Oh,
Yeah.
AI that can act.
Yes, absolutely. And what's interesting is that part of this transition was really spurred by customers asking us something very simple, which is, I see all of the amazing information that you're presenting me, but I continually have to make decisions based on that information. How can you make my life simpler instead of presenting me with more information? And that distance is agentic ops, our ability to act on that information.
I love that. I think you described it earlier as customers are really having decision fatigue.
Yes, absolutely.
And is that the number one thing you're hearing from customers?
Yeah, I think what's interesting is that we've, with this new wave that has spawned of agentically created information, agents accessing networks, they're saying that software as a service now is going to get consumed by agents creating software in and of themselves. This is effectively creating the noise versus signal problem. It's making it exponentially more difficult to understand not just what information is coming in, but how do you act based on that information. But here's the interesting thing, right? Customers are already burdened by the fact that they have to make those decisions, that they have to act. And they need us to make that process of decision elimination a real one.
I love that, the idea of decision elimination, which is actually getting down to here's what it is
Yep.
and here's what to do.
Correct.
So let's talk a little bit about what we last year we brought Agentic Ops to the market. We
Yep.
effectively planted a stake in the ground and said, this is what we believe. Why do you think we are going to be able to help people better than anyone else with this process?
Yeah. So Cisco is an incredible place, right? Not only do we have the makings on one side of the house and connecting everything that goes into AI, right? We're also on the forefront of using AI for our customers to make their lives easier. So it's a pretty unique environment. And what I would say is being able to span the stack is equally as important because it gives us a perspective on, by the way, right? Across your network, as an example, whether it's touching things that you don't own, right? The unknown surface area of SaaS applications, ISPs, what have you, all the way down to devices, right? Not only are we monitoring on the ground, are we actually helping people understand what is the real lived experience inside of your world, right?
Yeah.
That end-to-end perspective outside of the building for our customers is mirrored by our own understanding inside of the networks that we release to customers, whether it's at the data center level, whether it's at the racks, all the way through to the software that we provide. Now, not only is that a really unique position to be in, but it gives us the kind of rigor in perspective that, in my opinion, is quite unparalleled out there. that I've seen.
That's pretty incredible because in this world of everything, I mean, I feel like every company has some kind of AI something. What you're actually, I think, is, and certainly we're a little biased, but I think this holds up in credibility, is that our unique vantage points allow us to build better AI.
I would say, and it's interesting, right? So when we think about, Kris, when we think about how the industry is advancing with artificial intelligence, people usually talk about, oh, what's the latest and greatest model, right? And we kind of, in a way, are over rotating because everybody's trying to get to like artificial general intelligence.
Yeah.
But artificial and general intelligence is a great goal, and I think that we'll make progress towards getting there. People are really just looking to have general intelligence applied. And I think that being able to apply the intelligence where it's needed, right? And present that in a way that is actionable to the customer is really all about where Cisco's differentiable advantage stands, right? We have the whole perspective.
Yeah.
We can insert AI where you need it.
Great.
And by the way, we can do that everywhere both you and your customers are.
That's pretty. So let's talk a little bit about these solutions.
Yeah.
Right? We talked about AI Canvas last year. We've
Totally.
kind of made progress. We introduced the deep network model.
Yep.
Give us some thoughts on, and I know we've just expanded the agentic capabilities that we can offer customers. So talk a little bit about the ecosystem we're building, some of the solutions we're building.
Yeah.
What are you most excited about?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot I'm excited about. But I will say that I think Cisco's participation spans all different, intersection points that we've seen, whether it comes down to the protocols that we interact with at a software layer, as an example, exposing the intelligence in a curated and easy to use interface such as AI Canvas.
Yeah.
Making all of the information that you really need to be accessible in one singular place. Or as an example, let's say that you're not necessarily in front of a laptop and you want to get that embedded somewhere else, using native protocols such as MCP to extend the information, let's say, as I was saying, the intelligence to wherever it is that you need to be.
I love that. Let's talk a little bit about MCP. There's, every time it feels like there's a new vernacular that
Yeah.
everyone needs to know in this land.
Yeah.
Tell me what MCP is. Why should people care?
MCP is it is the only thing that you really need to know about it is this is how agents access tools and skills. It's a mechanism really for an agent to get access to intelligence.
Ah, okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So how does MCP work with the API land? Is that, do they work together, or is this a whole new thing? How do those relate?
Actually, it's a pretty good question because today a lot of our customers are building their solutions on top of APIs if you have automations
Yes,
and
exactly.
things like that.
Yeah.
And so there are questions that become like, well, I've built all of these automations here. They interact with your APIs. This MCP thing, where does that fit into the picture?
Yeah.
And the reality is that, if you're building logic on top of APIs, what you really want to do is you want to build flexibility into your response to whatever comes from that API. Now, historically, the only way that we've been able to do that is we've said, well, put in some more automation, right? And we have a bunch of tools to make that actionable. But MCP is kind of interesting in that you can have a reasoning step over those inputs. And an agent can actually use that to understand, well, in fact, yes, this is a way for me to interface with the system, an API, but actually instead of just, well, I'm going to take this input and this output and do something with it, I have a mechanism to think about it, and that's what MCP does. It gives them a way to think.
So, Raj, what I'm hearing you say with MCP then is that we can start asking agents or the whole agentic questions
Yes.
rather than like trying to figure the thing out. So now I can ask, what caused the outage? Is that right?
So, Kris, if you're like me,
Yeah.
you have your preferred question interface.
Yes.
Right?
Okay.
I'm not going to say that I have, X or Y and, the interface wars, right? But usually when I need an extra brain,
Yeah.
right, I hop into
Yeah,
somewhere and
yeah,
I
okay.
say, okay, go, figure this thing out for me. And I, as the world shakes out and we figure out what those interfaces are, and it ends up being AI Canvas as an example, I think what we'll learn is that the agent's ability to get that information and answer those questions more efficiently will also evolve as our interaction models with agents evolve as well. And Cisco's differentiation here is that not only can, no matter what the protocol is, whether it's MCP or something else, not only are we going to make sure that we give the right answers, right? Based on 40 years of experience and a tremendous amount of wealth of knowledge on how networks work. Not only are we going to make sure that we've governed those interactions, that agents aren't going rogue. And by the way, right, we're talking a lot about decisions.
Yeah.
We want to make sure that they're making the right ones, right? We're going to make sure that it is a seamless way to get the right answer consistently. So take your pick, swap in MCP, swap in, 3-letter word, whatever it ends up being, API, etc. Cisco's going to make sure that we deliver the right answer every time, wherever you are.
Oh my gosh, now that's a quote, the right answer. So that's a bold claim. But let me ask, what makes us, what gives us confidence to at least start on that path? What's in the Cisco arsenal to kind of start helping our AI be better AI?
Yeah, totally. So I think, we recently, to your point, announced not only just the deep network model, but a lot of how we're cascading our AI through our products resonates not only with usage of the deep network model, but we're beginning to tap into how do we expand that into every single AI interaction that we have? How do we cascade things like, as an example, Cisco validated designs?
Yeah.
How do we integrate that with the latest and greatest reasoning, the most aware and intelligent models, and contextualize that to your network? Right?
Yes.
As an example. Another, really interesting thing that I've seen recently is how do we actually bring deterministic automation to agentic workflows, right? Now, whether that exists in the context of fixing channel utilization, expanding, as an example, DHCP pools. I mean, these are things that, operators day to day have to actually take on of themselves. But to that earlier point that I had talked about, decision elimination, right? We need to make it as simple as click a button, use the best intelligence, whether that means, Cisco trusted, decades of experience, latest and greatest foundation model, whatever, again, take out your pick. We need to make that simple and present it to the
I
customer.
love that. But I'm going to go back to that word you used, deterministic, going back to vernacular here.
Totally.
Tell us what deterministic, what is that?
Determinism is, and thank you for asking that question, because a lot of these terms get thrown around pretty often. Look, here's the story. If you want to deliver a maximum uptime experience to your customers, you need to have predictability. Determinism gives us the ability to understand, based on these inputs, you are going to get these outputs consistently. And one of the benefits of using AI with determinism, meaning you have predictability, is that you can get flexibility in understanding what those inputs are.
Give us an example.
Yeah.
Walk me through. First of all, thank you for that. And deterministic, I've heard it in context of our agentic workflows.
Yeah, totally.
That is a product. That is a cool product. If you haven't used it, use it. Talk to me about how all of this, is there an example you can give people? What is like the hairy audacious goal for the common IT person?
100%. Look, here's the deal, right? If you have an issue, like say for example, DHCP pool exhaustion.
Yep.
If you have an issue and you can point to a solution that is a well-worn, well-understood remediation of that particular issue, being able to predictably apply that specific solution to fix that problem is all about what determinism provides us.
Got it.
And workflows takes that predictability and turns it into a consistent pattern that not only you can edit, but you can see executed. So inside of the Meraki console, and we're bringing it to the rest of the Cisco products as well, you have the ability to see a decision log of all of the different pieces as they're assembled together, as well as the execution of those pieces in a atomic, we call atomic, kind of like bite-sized individual way, piece by piece.
Raj, I am going to do a quick run through of some of the AI and agentic AI capabilities that customers can
Love it.
access today.
Yeah.
So the first one on the list is AI Assistant.
Yeah.
So what's your favorite thing about the AI Assistant?
My favorite thing about the AI assistant is it's an easy way for me to get an answer whenever I have a question about what is actually happening in my network right now.
So Raj, AI Assistant's also, I believe, integrated with agentic workflows?
Yes. Actually, today, you have the ability to ask the AI assistant to trigger any kind of created workflow that you have, but we're also extending the AI assistant to create workflows based on existing automations as well. And you can fire those from the AI assistant soon.
That's pretty cool. That's going to save, I think, talk about simplifying operations. Okay, talk to me about intelligent packet capture.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah,
what do you...
so look, packet capture analysis is a pretty, I would say time-intensive process, right? The ability to bring in the intelligence layer on top of going through packet capture and introspection brings that mundane aspect of looking through the logs and understanding what happened down to seconds instead of minutes and hours.
So what about AI config?
So what's interesting is we've been publishing architectural best practices for a very long time. Cisco Validated Designs has been this thing that I think lives on the shelves of a lot of folks in terms of reference manual. And what we're going to do, and what we're actually already are releasing right now, is contextualizing those best practices so you don't have to think about it, and it's accessible in one click.
Oh, that's... You know what's interesting? You've used this word contextualized a few times, and I'm going to step away from like lightning round of products to just talk about this idea. So I've been thinking about this thing about the land of AI, what makes agentic AI slightly different.
Totally.
And I feel like we talk about intelligence a lot.
Yeah.
Because intelligence, artificial intelligence. But I wonder how you feel about that. Are we moving into a territory where it's not enough for AI to have intelligence, but also judgment?
Yeah.
Because I feel like judgment gets into this place of, in order for me to think through how to do something, I have to apply some amount of contextualized reasoning to it. So
yeah.
what do you think about this?
No, absolutely. I mean, okay, so this is really interesting because in the early innings of us understanding how we apply agency, and I'm not just talking about Cisco, I'm talking about, hey, cool, now we have this really awesome capability that can do things.
Yeah.
We had this pattern called human in the loop. And in fact, it still exists, which is basically taking the actual judgment of an action and making sure that the human has the ability to make the call, to flip the switch, to turn the key, right? And to your point around context, right? It's all whether that decision is a good one or not is all about the right kind of context that goes into that decision. This is not just talking about, agents and AI and all this stuff. If I want to buy a car, I need the right information.
True,
what am I going to do? Go to one dealership when, there's another one across the street that's got the same It's all about the context, right? And Cisco has, again, the full context across where your network is. And so our ability to provide the right kind of judgment, whether it's, by the way, enabled via AI, whether it has a human in the loop, depending on the impact, depending on the safety of that decision, or whether it's something as simple enough as, hey, guess what? We made sure that you have ARM enabled so that we're maximizing, right? Make sure you use that feature, right?
And I'm going to have you explain that in a second, but okay, finish your thought.
Right. Whether it's something as simple as make sure you're optimizing for your channel allocation, you have to have that right context, right? And that's what Cisco provides.
I love that. I do want you to explain what
No,
AI
it's
RRM.
totally fine. Yeah.
You met.
Yeah, I hit that note there. So AI radio resource management is all about optimization of the radio frequencies that you have inside of a channel band. That's a lot of words for basically saying we want to make sure that if there are a lot of folks that are using a lot of your devices in one place, that they can all get the maximum amount of use out of their devices and their network at the right time through AI.
You know, I realize that Cisco isn't a company that's out there. We're not. I think we take great pride in people being able to trust us, to have credibility.
Yeah.
We're not ones to talk about AI just for the sake of talking about AI. We're really about solving true problems,
Yep.
making sure that our customers are having the best experience.
Yeah.
But we just spent a little bit of time talking about all the AI capabilities. First, we established Agentic Ops. We talked about AI Canvas. We talked about AI Assistant. We talked about agentic workflows through the AI Assistant. We talked about things like intelligent packet capture. We talked about AI configurations. We had a discussion about the MCP ecosystem we're building. Feels like Cisco is really taking this moment seriously.
Yeah.
And feel like at the end of this, the other things I've heard you talk about is it's not just enough that we're building this with trust.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about why customers should trust us for building this, and how do they start gaining that trust, or how did they start gaining that trust?
Yeah. So operations is at a turning point, right?
Yeah.
We now have begun to see not only that exponential load begin to stress a lot of these different networks.
Yeah.
We've seen customers turn to us as a trusted partner, to your point,
Yeah.
right? To help them figure out how to manage this now and in the future.
Sure.
And where does that trust come from, right? To your point.
Yeah.
Because trust is earned, right? It does not. It does not come, just by showing up and saying, "Hey, this is who we are, and this is what we can do."
Yeah.
Cisco has had decades of experience in not only understanding where the problem areas are, but building those safeguards into the hardware layer and the software layer, and now finally the intelligence layer. So our ability to navigate the pinch points, the pitfalls, and the challenges that come with this exponential turn is rooted and grounded in that process that we have shared on this journey with customers. So it's not just about the decades of expertise. It's not just about owning the end-to-end. What it ultimately comes down to is, are we partnering with customers to understand how to make their lives better or not? And that's that foundation that trust is built on.
Oh, I love that. We really appreciate you spending some time with Raj and I. I certainly had a lot of fun with you, Raj.
Likewise.
This was a great conversation. And we hope that you try out many of the solutions we talked about today.
Thank you so much, Kris.